Good morning. This is Bill from Auto Europa Naples on a, you know what, it's not a very nice Florida Thursday. It's a little bit muggy outside. We're in like day 18, 19 of destroying the entire global economy. I did find out a couple of good things, and one is that is whiskey does kill the coronavirus, so chances are I'm not immediately going to be infected, and that's helpful. It's also given me cause to boost my intake, which is just terrific. So even if I'm on my third or fourth tumbler today, that's fine. It's just going to help me keep healthy. Probably cigarettes help as well, so I'm in great shape. That said, I do have this 1994 Mercedes-Benz S350 turbo diesel. This is a W140 car, which I've done before. I've done a few reviews on these things, so I'm not going to get into the big history of the 140. I'll get a quick overview. It was probably one of the most controversial Mercedes-Benz of the last 30 or 40 years. It was Bruno Sacco's last S-Class. He didn't love the design. There were some arguments over it. There were some delays. There were some cost overruns. People actually got fired over this car, including the chief engineer at the time. It just did not go smoothly for Mercedes. But that said, it probably is one of the most significant S-Classes of all time. Maybe one of the most undoubtedly one of the most over-engineered cars of all time. Questionably the most over-engineered car of all time. It was much more expensive than the prior generations and had repercussions that lasted quite a long time in the Mercedes world. We've got 3 generations of S here today. I parked these other 2 up here. This is a W221. This is a V12 car. I have reviewed this car earlier, so that's in the history somewhere. And that is an 01 S500 over there, which is up on the website, but I haven't reviewed it yet. I parked these here and left them running with the defrost on, so they'd kind of tone down a little bit. But anyway, so that blue one, the midnight blue car, is the car that followed this 140 car. And the silver one, the 221, is the one that came after the 220 and was a response to criticisms of the 220. So we have 3 very controversial versions of Mercedes S-Class here. But let's get back into this one for a moment. So this is a 140 diesel model. This is kind of the early gen, 94, maybe the last of the early gen. Still has the Tiger detectors in the back, which we'll get into. The styling of the car is very somber. As I like to say, these things have absolutely no sense of humor at all. By the way, you know, getting into this coronavirus thing for a minute, here's something that I don't entirely understand. I read yesterday that this whole thing came about because some little bastard ate a bat somewhere. Ate a bat. And as a result, the entire global economy gets to crash. I mean, what about friggin' Ozzy Osbourne? 40 years ago, he ate a bat. You know, that didn't disrupt things beyond maybe the, what do they call it, the PRMC or something. They got upset, but I'm not sure that Ozzy eating a bat led to the destruction that we've got going now. They did say that it led to suicides, but I think, honestly, if you had to chalk up suicides from listening to music, you're probably more likely to find that Mariah Carey or Celine Dion has caused more. But anyway, I've got Siri talking in my pocket. So anyway, some guy eats a bat, and the next thing you know, we're all confined to our houses, and it's impossible to find toilet paper. That's really wonderful. Who knew? You know, again, you know, you get your Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's out, and, you know, he's trying to, look at this thing. Wow, look at that. We are America. That is incredible. I do believe that was a rather beautiful bald eagle flying overhead. All right, now that's a sign. I don't know. That's got to be some kind of a sign. Anyway, you get your Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's out, and he's, you know, if he knew, instead of all these expensive things, that he could, you know, kill the American economy by having someone eat a bat, I think they would have done it a long time ago. Anyway, nobody wants to hear this crap. Back to the car. So the 140 diesel, and the 140s in particular, really did have some issues. They were delayed 18 months, primarily because BMW all of a sudden came out with a V12 engine. Mercedes did not have a V12 ready to go. So it took them a little while to figure that out. and they did get it together so they could have a V12 to compete with BMW. There was a time when Mercedes wasn't really directed by other companies, but I suppose by the time this came out, they had to take all that into consideration. Bruno said the car did borrow heavily from the Jag XJ40. That was a car that inspired him a little bit. He wanted to make sort of a German Jaguar. Did not succeed, by the way. Apparently the engineering chief, the big VP in charge of engineering, kept raising the roofline on Bruno because he was like 6'8" or something. Every time he got in the car, he wanted it to be taller, so he kept dragging the roof up. Finally, Bruno had to just extend the whole car, lengthen and widen it so it looked normal. But anyway, we'll get into all that. The 140 car, over-engineered, almost ridiculous, incredibly somber, no sense of humor at all. Very good car to have in black. This is also the car that killed Princess Diana. Well, it didn't. There's arguments over that. Anyway, look, let's just get into the damn thing. Let's just get into it. So back here, and I'm not going to demonstrate it because I don't have anyone to help me, but these little things are what I call the tiger detectors, but in fact they're just these little chrome sticks that pop up when you put it in reverse, and you see them out the back window, and what that does is let you know the dimensions of this 17-foot long, 5,000-pound car, so you don't have to smash into anything. Very simple thing. Obviously that was usurped by Parktronic and reverse cameras. But back then, Mercedes' idea of giving you the corners of the car were these little pop-up things. And pop open the trunk. When I do that, this little chrome handle is going to shoot out like a switchblade. That makes it easy to get in. Okay, at a certain point, Mercedes moved the gas tanks from behind the rear seats. That made the trunks a little bit bigger, so you have nice room in here. This one has a trickle charger because it just didn't get driven that often. This car is owned by a friend of mine, the former professional pilot and former professional drinker. Very, very nice guy. But anyway, he bought this thing because he always loved sort of hyper-technical cars, and this is probably as hyper-technical as it gets. Anyway, plenty of room in the trunk. You're going to be able to get lots of crap in there. Mercedes did use an Alpine-based system, so if your car didn't come with the CD changer, but it was pre-wired for one, you could just plug an Alpine CD player in there and it would work fine. So he did that, and there it is. Everything nice in the trunk, no issues at all. We get under here, you're going to find, I don't know, we'll find a spare tire. Nice, everything proper, lovely as it should be, and just fine. I can use that little chrome handle to push down. It sucks the trunk down, pulls the chrome handle in. Good sign that the vacuum is working. Have a look under the hood. A lot of this car is actually run by vacuum, which is very true of Mercedes-Benz for years and years. They used vacuum systems where other people might use electric. For instance, all their door locks were run by vacuum. Okay, so here's a 3.5-liter inline-six diesel engine, putting out about 315 horsepower, very horsepowery for a diesel. And I can't remember the torque number, like 385 or something, but, plenty of torque to pull down a tree stump if you want to. These engines did have issues. They did have issues, very much unlike the earlier 5 and early 6-cylinder Mercedes diesels. By the time this one came along, they ran into a few problems. One of the biggest problems was caused by this little oxidizer trap they put on the exhaust manifold that would overheat the aluminum cylinder head. It would cause the cylinder head gasket to fail. Oil and coolant might seep into the number 1 piston, and bam, your connecting rods would bend. Mercedes-Benz had to deal with quite a few of those. Now, it's a little bit like the IMS issue in the Porsches, where everyone was terrified of it, even though it affected a relatively small number of the engines. But this guy, when he bought this car, many years ago, had 105,000 on it then. The first thing he did was pull the head off it, replace the head gasket, and have the micrometer put on the cylinder walls to make sure they weren't oval, because that is what happened. The cylinders would start to get eat up. They'd go from round to oval. The rods would bend, and whammo, you'd end up with a pretty big engine repair. So with 105,000 miles, every cylinder on this engine was perfectly round. He was happy. He put on a new gasket, bolted it down, off he went. And you know, for all intents and purposes, it seems that this is one of the engines that escaped the problem and will go on for many, many years the way a Mercedes diesel engine should. Every Mercedes diesel engine does have a lovely clatter, a lovely sound, a gack, 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 gack. It's just like coming home. I can't explain it. It's a lovely, nice feeling that you just feel like you've got something under the hood that really matters and you're going to love. It is, of course, turbocharged, and that's part of that big you know, horsepower rating. It's so industrial. I mean, when you look at all the connecting mechanisms, all of the fuel lines, this big screw-on fuel filter, you know, you can just tell this is something that would have been used in a U-boat or a Panzer tank. I mean, it is a true, you know, bit of German engineering that's just beautiful to behold. Absolutely beautiful. So anyway, with 127 on this thing, and you know, well looked at mechanicals, this is one that's going to go on for a long, long time. You won't have any issues with it. Well, who knows? Maybe have tons of issues with it, but hopefully not. They do have a service position, these hoods. This is really hard to do one-handed. I pull down on that and then push up. All right, so you see how that little tab now is behind where it would fit in. If we go to this other side and do the same thing, pull this back, you have to pull down a little bit. Everything's hard one-handed. Push up on the hood, and whammo, you've now got the hood in what's called the service position. That makes doing regular maintenance on the car an absolute breeze. That's the kind of over-engineering that made these cars wonderful. I mean, you're just not going to see that on a 78 Mercury Cougar. You know, this is just neat stuff from the Benz world. Anyway, I'll get that back down. Now, he did do a couple of cosmetic... Oh, God, we've got to lift that up now. It's a two-way thing. There we go. He did do a couple of cosmetic, what I would call upgrades or improvements on this car. He had it painted by another friend of ours, a guy named Marco, who's completely insane, but we won't go into that. And Marco's a fantastic painter, except dealing with him, yeah, dealing with him is not easy. But anyway, Marco laid down a beautiful paint job on this car, you know, the kind of thing that would cost you $8,000 if you had to get it done. But Marco probably did it for, you know, a bag of Coke and some, you know, whiskey. But he painted the lower cladding, which in this year was generally a different color, contrasting. They didn't go to matching cladding until later in the 140 series. And he updated the wheels to next-gen 220 wheels, which, you know, take it or leave it, that's what it is. And I think it's a fine upgrade. I probably wouldn't have done it, but I think it's nice. Also, the big Euro headlights in front, the black bumper, the wipers, you know, very, very attractive. Now, real quick, to get into these other two S-classes, you can see just how different they are. Some people say that this 221 model looks like a big RX-8, you know, with that front fender hump and the rear hump. I think that's a pretty fair criticism, but, you know, it's kind of cruel at the same time. But God, I love V12s. This S was a response to the overcomplicated issues of the 140. You know, people just said, you know, you have to draw the line somewhere. You have to stop. It's, you know, this thing is getting insane. So this one became a little bit less expensive, more attainable, actually became bigger inside, which was nice. And now we look at this. Look at this. Look at, I don't even know what kind of things these are, these birds, but they look big and mean and angry. Thank God they're not too interested in me. But anyway, I'll do a review of this one in a few days so we can get into it. But there you go. There's 3 generations of S, which is kind of neat to see with each other. One of those days. But what do we have but time now anyway? What really do we have but time? All right, back seat of this car. Very, very nice. I like seeing black leather inside a black car. helps with that whole somber thing. It makes me think of, you know, the guy in the Lithuanian crime syndicate he probably wouldn't have a diesel. He'd probably have the 5 or the 600, but he definitely would have black. And it does look nice and sinister and proper in this car. You can see the fit and finish, of course, is incredible. Part of what made this car so expensive, these ridiculously over-engineered chunky door panels with beautiful, it looks like Zebrano wood in this one. You know, again, it just was more than they needed, and yeah, probably what they wanted to do when the engineers were running the company, but it drove the accountants batshit. Finally, the accountants mounted a coup and took over Mercedes-Benz and changed everything. But in this day, the engineers were running the show. So you'd be able to fit 3 Canadians back there with no issues. They'd be pretty chipper. You got little bags up here to hide your 9mm in. Probably something in the center console as well. Yeah, very nice spot for a small handgun, and everyone's going to be pretty chipper there. I don't know who's calling me, but I don't care. I'm just going to ring. This also does have the vacuum assist door closers. See that happening there and here. That's something that's often broken on these cars, so it's nice to see it's still working here. That does show maintenance on the car. Also, when you lock and unlock this car, let's see if this works. These little things in the door should flash. And they do. You see, so, I mean, again, completely unnecessary. Really, genuinely unnecessary. And now it's green to show that it's open. Oh, God. That's why these things were so much money. All right, let's get in this thing. Actually, I have to go. I see who's calling so they don't call 50 times. I'll be right back. Okay, the phone call, just not that important, so we're going to keep going. Key in, you can see when I do that, I get my glow plug indicator over there, out nice and fast. And that big 6 lights right off and does what you want it to do. Sounds fantastic. You can tell that's got good compression and drives nice. You know, classic Mercedes instrument cluster. Could have been out of the earlier versions. You still have an analog odometer. You've still got the orange feedback on the kilometer version of the cluster. Very, very nice and proper. Over here you've got a very classic and proper Mercedes light switch. Let's turn that down a little bit. You've got your parking brake release. You've got this power indicator for the power switch for the steering column. This was the kind of crap they had to add to compete with Lexus. When that LS 400 came out, it just changed everything for Mercedes. You can see we've got a kind of an issue with the temp gauge. I haven't quite figured it out. I put in a new sending unit. It didn't fix it, so maybe we'll look a little bit deeper, but anyway, it seems to be, you know, behaving erratically. When he bought it, he did end up putting a new, what do you call it, engine wiring harness in it. That was a famous thing with these cars. Mercedes used some weird biodegradable engine harness that would fail and had to be replaced. So that has been done, but apparently we've still got issues with the temp gauge, which acts a lot like the oil pressure gauge in that it just seems to peg when you put the gas down. So that's pretty damn irritating. Over here you've got, you know, again, the fit and finish in this thing is just ridiculous. You've got a nice little spot to put your, as the 90s, I don't know if people are still doing cocaine, but you could. You had a nice little place for it there, maybe a switchblade. I know the original, if it had a cell phone option, that would go in there. Down here you've got a very nice electronic climate control unit buried in this beautiful Zebrano wood. You've got, and there the code. We had the battery off. I do have the code for this. I guess while we're doing this, we should stick the code in. This does have a very nice set of books, but everything's hard one-handed. Maybe I get a cameraman soon. What the hell? Why not? There we go. All right, security code 31241. Let's give that a go. I think we hit that. We do. So now we got our radio going. We got REO Speedwagon. Well, you can't go wrong with that. There's a nice little place in this glove box for, I guess this is a cup holder of sorts. Maybe a nice place for a wine flute. Also another place to put some more drugs or narcotics of some kind. I don't know what you'd put in here. Maybe quarters? I really don't know. But anyway, you know, what did this little stupid thing cost? What did this add to the sticker price? A thing that nobody will ever use, ever. You could, you know what, okay, you tell me you're going to use it, you're lying. You're just not. You're just not going to use that. You have that big Mercedes star leading the way. If there's one thing that I absolutely love, it's a big Mercedes diesel. I mean, these things run down the road like freight trains. You know, they return decent gas mileage. They have incredible torque, and they're just terrific driver's cars. You just feel like putting, you know, 1,000 miles on them on the Autobahn running at 120. They've just got a lovely feeling to them. Get our defrost on here. Good power from that turbo diesel. Again with the phone. Again with the phone. Somebody needs to stop that before I completely freak out. Very nice input from the steering. Green lights here. Let's turn that off. That's too noisy. And away we go. So that is the whole point of these S-Class diesels, is you just want to get on the highway and start burning up miles and miles and miles of interstate. It's what they're made for. It's what they do the best. And they return great gas mileage. They give you fantastic stability in terms of the way the car feels on the highway. Incredible poise, and a lovely, lovely engine and transmission setup in this car, in the way that it just feels so rewarding for the driver. Tracks down the road nice and smooth, you know, the way a 140 should. See if we can sneak in here. I'm always going through this really crappy section of Naples. I've been thinking about doing a vehicle tour of Naples. Maybe I'll take the old Datsun, set the camera up in the back, and give you a tour of the nicer sections. I'll give you a running diatribe of all the stuff that's going on as well. Make a little U-turn here. So anyway, there it is. I mean, the 140 car is a fascinating period in Mercedes history, when they were transitioning from sort of this vintage wood and leather, nuts and bolts type manufacturer into something a lot more technological and hyper-technical. You know, the Lexus was out. It was competing with Mercedes. BMW picked up their game. They were more vicious than they used to be in terms of competition. So Mercedes really had to change. They really had to first of all, make the cars more profitable, because when they let the engineers build them, they became very expensive and, you know, priced themselves out of the competition. And beyond that, they had to modernize their techniques in such a way that, you know, that it could be a much more mass-produced vehicle. So they went from being sort of a small-scale, you know, ultra luxury maker of incredibly resilient automobiles into something a little bit more mass produced, like a Volkswagen or an Audi, which is something that they had to do. And what's interesting about this 140 car is that it's just smack dab in the middle of that. So you've got a lot of the old Mercedes stuff in this, a lot of the engineer stuff that was expensive and overbuilt and ridiculous, and some of the new stuff, some of the gadgetry, some of the electronics that had to make its way into a Benz for them to compete with, you know, what the market wanted. That's a good driving diesel. So there it is. This is what I would call a very driver quality, good condition, very well maintained diesel, 94 S350 turbo diesel. Goes down the road great color combo, nice car all around. There's my big sales pitch. If you have an interest, you can see it on our site at aenaples.com. Otherwise, I'm gonna keep doing what I do. I was in Publix yesterday, the grocery store. They actually had paper towels, although I was limited to the number I could buy. I wanted 3 single rolls, and they only let me buy 2. Usually I go in and buy 8 at a time, but it's a different world we live in now. And that was good. They also had chicken for the dogs, which was good. They didn't have that the last time, so we've had to feed them whatever. But anyway, maybe things are starting to return to normal. I don't know. I hope so. I hope so, because it's all ludicrous to me. But thank you so much for having a look. I appreciate it. We'll do something fun tomorrow. Maybe I'll take the Datsun out. I don't know, something. And we'll go from there. Take care and hang in there, and we'll see you next time.